Today I'm going to go through adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing decimals all together. I'm just going to take one at a time. For each one, I'm going to give you a sentence and an example of how it's done and describing how it's done and then showing you how it's done. So, first one, adding decimals. All right, to add decimals, what you have to do is add like first you have to line up the decimal point. Then add like normal. And that's all you really need to know for adding decimals. Okay? And in order to do that, I'm going to go ahead and do this example. 3.29 plus 5. Okay, so notice that this 5 is a whole number, which means it has a decimal right here. So I'm going to put 5.00. And I add that, so I'm going to get rid of all this. And then I just add like normal. So 9, 2, and 8. And my decimal comes straight down. When you are done, you should be able to draw a line like connect the dots straight through your decimals. Okay, next one is subtracting decimals. All right, for subtracting decimals, it's the same thing. You line up the decimal and subtract like normal. Okay, and then in your answer, you bring that decimal straight down. All right, so here we go. Here's an example. I'm going to say 0.996 minus 0.5. The big mistake that kids are going to make is they're going to try to just subtract like this because they don't even think about the fact that this is a decimal point right here. But you can't do that. You've got to move this decimal point over so that it is underneath the other decimal point. Now then when you're looking at that, that's a little bit complex to look at with your brain. So I like to go ahead and put in a couple of zeros as placeholders. And then you just subtract. 6 minus 0 is 6. 9 minus 0 is 9. 9 minus 5 is 4. Decimal comes straight down and then 0. So there's my answer and I'm done. Okay, next thing, multiplying decimals. Now multiplying and dividing get a little bit complicated. So for multiplying, it's easier than dividing. That's one thing for sure. So let's see. We're going to do multiplying decimals. For multiplying decimals, what you do is you ignore the decimal, then multiply like normal, then count the digits after the decimal in the answer, and that's how many will be after the decimal in the solution. And by answer, I should have said problem, and that was my bad. So let me go ahead and make that a little bit smaller so that we have some room to work our example. Okay, so we're going to multiply like normal, then count the digits after the decimal in the problem, and that's how many will be after the decimal in our answer. So as soon as you see the problem, and I'll just say 0.65 times 3. As soon as I see this problem, I know there are 1, 2 digits after the decimal in the problem. So no matter what my answer is, it's going to have 2 digits after it in the after the decimal in that solution. I don't have to worry about lining up decimals here. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and multiply. This is going to be 15. And you do all your carrying and everything the same way. 6 times 3 is 18 plus 1 is 19. And then there's 2 digits after the decimal in my problem. There will be 2 digits after the decimal in my solution. Okay? Same thing is true if you have a decimal in both parts of your problem. So if you had, for example, 0.6 times 0.3. Again, 6 times 3 is 18. And there are 2 digits. The tendency is going to be kids want to put that decimal right here, but it's not. There are 2 digits after the decimal in my problem. There will be 2 digits after the decimal in my answer. Okay, last thing is the division. the division is a lot more complicated, so I'm going to kind of do it in two stages. The first stage is dividing when you have no decimal outside the house. Dividing by a whole number. You just divide like normal. Nope. And bring up the decimal point. So, that would be a problem that looks like this. 3.6 divided by 3. 3 goes into 3 one time. Minus 3 is 0. I bring my 6 down. 3 goes into 6 two times. Minus 6 is 0. My decimal comes straight up. And I am done. Okay, that's really easy. The harder part is when you have a decimal divided by a decimal. Okay, or anything divided by a decimal. So dividing by a decimal. For that, you have to move the decimal inside and outside the house until there is no decimal outside the house. I always say decimals live outdoors. Or, I'm sorry, decimals live indoors. And so you want to think about that. Decimals live indoors. You cannot have a decimal outside the house. So if I have a problem where I've got, say, 0.5 going into 0.25, well, this decimal has to be moved over once. Okay? And when you do something to the outside, you also have to do it to the inside. Otherwise, you're changing the value. So I can rewrite that problem as 5 divided, or 2.5 divided by 5. 5 doesn't go into 2. 5 goes into 25 5 times. Minus 25 is 0. And then my decimal comes straight up. So kind of once you've got the decimal moved, you go back to this. Okay? So let me do that one. Let me do one more of those. So let's say we have 0.01, and you're dividing that into 2. All right, this is a harder one because you've got to move this over twice, and there is no decimal inside, so you've got to put 1 and then move it over twice. Zeros as placeholders. So this problem actually becomes 1 divided by 200. Okay, and that's going to be 200. All right, so let me go ahead and stop there. And I'm going to make another video just about dividing decimals, and that will be up there as well.